Hello, everyone. My name is Michael. For those who don't know me, I have been Zcash since 2022 as ambassador and helped by amazing team since then. I have also been a big fan of Privacy and ZK. So before that, I already knew about Zcash. I'm very happy to be here and my third year straight as participant in ZCO event. And we did the opportunity to create some event in Brazil called Zcon Voices, which was the only country outside of the US to make that. So thank you for the gift. I'm already using my Zcon 6 t-shirt. So thank you to the Nick, Zcash Foundation, and Zach Hub. Today, we will talk about a very important topic about CDBCs, like I think is all over the world. This topic is important. Bringing updates about CDBC, which Zcash Brazil has sponsored for 2 years in a row on a special podcast called Block Cafe. So where he brought experts and people who work there and to talk about it. So today I have pleasure of being with Casta to talk about this topic. Hey, Casta, thank you for agreeing to be with me on this. We are the guy in Brazil, so please introduce yourself to Sketch community.
Hello, all. First of all, Michael, thanks for the invitation. Thanks for Zcash for hosting the event. It's a pleasure to be here. I'll be quick about myself because we have a lot of good content to pass on. I'm an entrepreneur in the crypto space, but also have a long career as a professor, researcher, and software consultant on the Web2 space, like almost 20 years doing that. I'm also from academic formation, software engineer, so I have a master thesis on computer science and the specialization of my thesis was on parallel and distributed computing. So when I got into blockchain, it was very intuitive and very natural for me, and is where I feel at home today. I'm also a content producer. I have my own channel and Instagram channels, and I regularly produce content in Brazil. Not talking about how to get rich with crypto, but talking about the social economical implications of our technology in the world.
That's great. To continue with Casta, he will give a short presentation explain the PIX and DREX in Brazil. I think this will be an amazing presentation because that's a Brazilian current payment system. So that will be good to tell more people about that, how it works. So, and the questions you answer at the end, okay? So go ahead, Casta.
Great. We have the slides here. So we're going to talk about the DREX, which is the Brazilian CBDC project, and of course, wrap up with the privacy implications of such a project. Before we even talk about DREX, we have to talk about PIX, all right? We have in Brazil a system called PIX. PIX is not like an abbreviation, an acronym, or not an initialism. Is really a brand name that should like talk about pixels and technology and transactions. The system went live on the end of 2020 in Brazil. It's a payment system. What does it do? It offers like easy transactions, real time 24/7 transactions. It costs nothing for retail users. So individuals in Brazil can do like free cross interbank, cross institutional transactions free of charge. It's really easy to use. You rely on QR codes or based IDs. It is not really the brightest idea in the world, but you can refer to your Pix account using your cell phone number, your email, or even or correspondent to your social security number. This is the kind of IDs that we tend to use when dealing with the Pix systems. You can also use like random keys, but they are strange for the everyday person and they tend to use like this more based IDs approach. How does this system works? It's important to understand the workings of the system to see where are we going. You have on the end part payer and payee. It's a payment system. You use like an account provider or an app, but at the end you have banks which are direct participants of a kind of centralized interbank ledger. It's called the STR or the Reserve Transfer System. So the way that our central bank is solving the issue of cross payment between banks, between institutions, is by building itself a centralized ledger with instant settlement, with instant transfers, with instant payments. The system is really more than that. You have several actors working for making the system like build up. So you have the RSFIN, which is a kind of a private internet for big banks. It does not operate on the internet. It's a dedicated internet only for big banks to talk with the central bank. You have also a kind of an RPC for smaller banks or fintechs or like lesser services to connect. What this network does is that it pushes transactions to another system called SPI, which is an instant payment system that settles the transactions inside of the STR. If we think about this architecture in terms of blockchain, you will get something like that. This is a gross approximation, okay? It's more for didactic purpose than anything else. But if we compare this system to a blockchain solution, direct participants can have node-like access, or mean they are inside the network. They have direct access, or you have RPC-like access when you are using the PSTI. The network itself, RSFN, acts like a relayer which fills up a mempool of transactions to the SPI. Then the SPI job is to act somewhat like a layer 2 solution, sequencing and doing the validation of those transactions before pushing those transactions to the STR, which acts as a layer 1 settlement blockchain. Of course, these are not blockchains, these are centralized systems, and that is the catch. Our central bank has ownership, regulation, surveillance, and enforcement power over all of these parts or these modules of the PIX ecosystem. So PIX runs over this family of products and of institutions and of technologies. Well, if that is PIX, what is DREX then? Because when we talk about CBDCs, most of the people will think that governments and countries are pursuing CBDCs to achieve something like PIX, using CBDCs to have instant and cost-free transactions. In Brazil, we already have that with PIX, so we don't need blockchain technology to build the PIX because we have already built it using centralized solutions. When you talk about DREX, DREX is something more like an acronym. It stands for digital, real, electronic, or economy, and the X there, who knows why it's there, just sounds modern. It's like of the Elon Musk syndrome. Let's put an X, and X is cool, and X is technology, and X is modern. DREX is not up and running. It's under experimentation. It's a pilot project under our central bank. It is a CBDC project by itself. But what does DREX offers, okay? It's more than payments. DREX aims for programmability. It intends to do smart contracts. It is directly derived from Ethereum. It uses Ethereum-like technology, not on the Ethereum public network, but using the frameworks of Hyperledger Besu. Unlike Ethereum, of course, DREX is not free to use. It's not free to operate. It is permissioned. It means not anyone can validate, not anyone can use. It is not exactly private. It does not classify itself as a private blockchain because transactions are visible by those who are inside of the network. This is including a problem to DREX, like if you say our commercial banks are part of the DREX blockchain, they do not want to see their like competitors' balance sheet. Banco do Brasil does not want Banco Itaú to see its ledger. And this is one of the main roadblocks right now of the DREX project, is that how do we implement privacy inside of this blockchain? There are many approaches being pursued for that end, but so far not one single has been determined as the final solution. Well, and of course, we must talk about which kind of CBDC DREX is, because there are CBDCs and there are CBDCs. DREX is like a hybrid two-tier CBDC solution, which means that it starts as a wholesale CBDC. For those who don't know, a wholesale CBDC is a CBDC that only deals with bank transactions and the backbone of the financial ecosystem. So it does not reach the end user. Whereas retail CBDC, it's aimed to let's do custody, transactions, and let end users access smart contracts and services on this blockchain. But DREX aims to even one day reach retail CBDC, but is starting right now. It is a project that is experimenting with a wholesale CBDC. Okay. In its current stage, we are in pilot stage, but rather an advanced one when you compare Brazil to other countries. In the first phase, as we are doing smart contracts, we are doing smart contracts to tokenize something. In the first phase of the pilot, they were experimenting with the tokenization of public debt. Think of T-bills, like treasury bills and public debt as well. We call it Tesouro Direto or direct treasury in Brazil. But it's a experimentation with like, let's tokenize public debt and program that inside the money itself. So it's a fairly advanced economical experiment in terms of government. I don't see much governments willing to experiment with the tokenization of the public debt, which is the backbone of the monetary policy by the central bank. It's very, very unusual. But we are already on the second phase, expanding to other use cases like let's tokenize real estate, automobile markets, forex, agricultural credits, experiment with systems for cross-border transactions, also experimenting on DeFi, like can we make liquidity pools for our tokenized bills? Does it work? Like let's make an Uniswap of government debt. How does is fair? And there is also current ties and experiments of our central bank with Chainlink, trying to see how can they use CCIP technology to make messaging between central banks, commercial banks, and including foreign banks if they intend to join the system to facilitate cross-border transactions. So in terms of like a technological ambitions, it is a fairly ambitious project, an advanced project. I had the chance in many opportunities to talk to the guys at our central bank, their technical team. And one thing that I can say for myself is that these guys really understand blockchain technology. They really know what Bitcoin is about, what Ethereum is about. Be it, of course, sometimes we like the government, sometimes we dislike the government, more times than not, one side or another. But that is not the merit of the discussion, is that in a technological aspect, these guys really understand the technology. They are very, very, very deep technical. Well, the DREX network itself, it's not yet like defined. We don't know how the network is going to be operated. I just showed you guys like how the PIX infrastructure works, but we have really not defined how it's going to be the infrastructure or the setup, architectural setup of the DREX network. What is likely to be? Well, it is likely that the Central Bank of Brazil will be some kind of super node. It will have like ultimate authority in the settlement of transactions, in the governance of the network. It is not going to be some kind of DAO where banks can vote on stuff. Like you have the authority of the central bank, like as a master node, some kind of super node. The large commercial banks, they would end up being something like full nodes to give like redundancy. They like the decentralization aspect, not to decentralize power, of course, but to gain redundancy. So if you have like a super national ledger, it would be nice if all of the large commercial banks have copies. And so if they act as full nodes, you get redundancy, you get some degree of safety and fault tolerance, which is interesting for them. They could also act as like RPC gateways for lesser institutions, not like smaller institutions. And of course, smaller banks and fintechs could operate as light nodes to help in the validation. They could even like set up RPC gateways for retail wallets to connect in a retail CBDC ecosystem. Foreign banks which want to talk with this system and facilitate ex-border transactions could also serve as full or light nodes. It is fairly possible. And financial institutions like our exchange market, or perhaps like institutions on the agricultural sector or on the mortgage sector could also have permission to set up smart contracts and tokenize assets on this blockchain. It is unclear if any of the previous structure of PIX will be leveraged for DREX, because DREX really is a DLT-based approach. It has its own degree of decentralization, but it's like the decentralization of the inner sphere of friends and partners, really permissioned. So it's not really about retail decentralization. It's about achieving a degree of decentralization with trusted partners to at least achieve fault tolerance and have some kind of redundancy. Well, if we have to sum it up in one sentence, I would say that DREX is for PIX what Ethereum is for Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is a payment system, PIX is a payment system. Some people will disagree, but it's just for like simplification here. And so Ethereum is about bringing programmability over something like Bitcoin. DREX is about bringing programmability to something like PIX. It is not about achieving instant payments. As I said, we already have that. DREX is something greater, for the good or for the bad. But DREX is about the creation of a full-fledged digital programmable infrastructure of economy for a huge country like Brazil. A country which has the proportions of a whole continent. It has a more than 200 million population. So it is really a huge challenge. There are like technical challenges that are like implementation challenges. Not all of Brazil individuals are connected to the internet. Not all of Brazilians have access to a smartphone. So of course, on emerging markets such as Brazil and other countries, when you try to do full-scale digitalization of any sort, you have to wonder what will happen to people access to technology, or even if they have like access to technology, they don't have the capacity to operate the technology. They have to be educated, they have to be like instructed on how to do it. There is a case that is very, very interesting in Brazil. um, there are like road tariffs when you are driving through a highway, and then you have to pay a tariff at some length of the highway. In Brazil, we have those like these barricades where you stop your car and then you pay your tariff, and then the barricade lifts up and then you move on. Recently, Brazilians have experimented with an automatic tariff system for highways where you just go with your car, and the system, like, there is no barricade. The system takes a photo of your car, and then you have a debt with the government. Simple as that. And it's up to you, like, to open an internet site and put up your numbers, your driver's license or your license plate, and then the system will tell you how much you are in debt, and then you have like to pay this debt. But there are like, this is doing like on smaller scale cities which people are not really instructed, so people haven't the slightest clue that they are being like debited for something. They don't even know which one is the site where you're going to download your debt and know how to pay your debt. So right now this system is being a huge failure because it is scaling up on huge amounts of debt that no one is paying, because most of the people doesn't even know the system is working, and they haven't the slightest idea on how to access the system and how to pay this debt. So you must of course be really careful when you talk about like, let's do automation, do digitalization, let's get out of this stuff and put it on the internet and let's make it digital, because people may not be up to it, may not catch up to it, may not have the means or the instruction necessary to operate such a system. This is the kind of challenges that such a project will face, of course, when it tries to go mainstream. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. What about the implications now that we understand a little about the DREX project? Brazil has a past history of like huge economic turmoil in the past, and also huge economical innovation. So we had in our past a moment in which our first elected president after the fall of the dictatorial regime, this president literally had the greatest idea of ever to seize and freeze and like hijack all the savings of the population in one time. Like, but not like big investors saving, like the everyday Joe savings, the simplest kind of savings, which we call it poupança. And they said, well, we need to fight inflation, so let's hijack everyone's poupança, everyone's savings. And they did that. And I know that lots of Brazilians have fears nowadays that, well, if Brazil does DREX, then the government of Brazil can like freeze and hijack our money. I said, well, guys, we did that 30 years ago, and we didn't even have a nice telephone infrastructure at that time. Like, it was difficult to phone someone, let alone have an internet or something like that. So this is in our past history. This is like a huge stain on our economical history and of failed projects and failed initiatives. But we also have in our history like the real plan, which is a great like feint, economical feint, or like we could talk a little about Plano Royale, but don't have time for that. But there are good videos on the internet that the title states something like "How Fake Money Saved Brazil's Economy." Because we literally made some kind of fake money to pretend that we are stabilizing the prices, and people believed that prices were being stabilized, so the economy stabilized itself. It also tells a lot about how the expectation of inflation causes inflation more than economical consequences at some times. And this is like there's a huge experiment and a huge success, and on how almost like a psyops operation like tackled hyperinflationary crisis really quick and really stabilized the economy for lots of years in Brazil. This is not only to talk about the past, but Brazil has a current. Nowadays, we have economic tomorrow and we have economic innovation. Like PIX, for the eyes of most governments and mainstream economists, PIX is a huge success. Like PIX facilitates a lot of velocity of the money in our economy. It is good for everyday users. People use it a lot and really use it a lot. But there are also some dispute and some turmoil. We have like a crisis nowadays in Brazil, a gambling crisis. So gambling is illegal in Brazil, but we have all kinds of sites nowadays, like sport bets or betting sites, which have those mini games that drain your money away. And Brazilians are heavily addicted to that, especially when you consider the poorer classes. Like the lower you go in the scale of the economical classes, the more you find a disposition for gambling addiction, trying to get rich quick, trying to escape poverty through gambling. And this is like an endemic crisis right now in Brazil. There are estimates that at 1 month, we have a social security program in Brazil, which is called Family Purse or Bolsa Família, or like family subsidies in which the government provides to people in need, like a salary, kind of like an income, basic income. And if you take the overall money that was spent on this program of basic income, I think 3 months ago in Brazil, 2 billion real, which is something like, take it by five, 20 by 5, $40 million, $400 million were spent on gambling. So this is a huge problem because the government is bringing subsidies for people to eat, for people to pay for the education of their kids, to improve their homes, their conditions of life, their healthcare, and they are literally taking the money and gambling the money away on these sites and like getting the money from the government to the hands of like owners of gambling companies. And there were talks about, well, could we use the PIX system to prevent people to sending the money to gambling sites? Is it a good idea? Is it a bad idea? Right now, it's only an idea because the PIX system does not support that kind of functionality, but this was discussed. We have discussions nowadays if people that are in debt with the IRS, we do not call it IRS, but our IRS, like you are owing money to the government, then you can be censored and pushed away from the PIX ecosystem. You are unable to use PIX. We are discussing if that's going to happen, if that is possible. We are also have a lot of political disputes when our governments try to pass legislation to the IRS to actively prospect any transaction over 5,000 reais, which would be something like $1,000. And people were really scared, got a lot of public backslash. But we have tension when you talk about, yes, PIX works great, everyone uses PIX, but PIX lives under the rule of central bank. And how can PIX be facilitated to enforce like government intentions or enforce law? And this is the kind of conflict that we are seeing right now. It pop-ups like in several news like that. Is a discussion that is ongoing. But talking about the privacy implications, PIX already does a lot of stuff. What can we do with PIX? And we don't need DREX to do that, okay? Our central bank has full oversight of all PIX transactions. Our data is leveraged for IRS taxing purposes. It is leveraged for law enforcement purpose. It is very easy for any agency to establish connections between individuals and institutions based on the PIX behavior. Transactions on PIX can be censored, can be reverted. Individuals can be expelled or institutions from the PIX system. Our data can be, we don't know if it actually is being, but our data can be leveraged for monitoring socioeconomical behavior. And if we see that we are tracking, like people are using the money to go to gambling, how do we know that? Because we are expecting where people are spending their money. And also we can use the PIX system to implement taxation policies. If everyone relies on PIX, we can tax PIX transactions and try to enforce socioeconomical behavior. For instance, well, if you're not paying your taxes to the government and you owe some debt to the IRS, then we implement a tax on your PIX and we are going to get the money out of your transactions until your debt settled, or perhaps to punish you for not being up with debt. That is the kind of thing that PIX can already do. We don't need a CBDC to do that. We have a system that already can do all of this kind of stuffs. So lots of the fears that Brazilians attribute to DREX, they are like misunderstoodments, because you should already fear. Those fears are not in the future. Those fears exist right now with PIX. If you talk about DREX, anything PIX can do, DREX can do on steroids. Easier, cheaper, faster, more complex, more sophisticated. But DREX can also enable like really huge scale instant freezing of assets. Let's freeze the wallets of a whole set of people snapping your fingers. It's possible. You can tell about like implementing restrictions on how people can spend money. Like you must spend money up to some date. You can only spend money for a specific purpose. You can only spend such an amount of money. DREX enables that. We can use DREX to do social score system in the likes of China. DREX is the perfect infrastructure for AI surveillance, because AI is good, but AI needs a good set of data. And if you do the whole economy on a blockchain, you standardize everything. And if all the data and all of the assets are standardized, it's really fairly easier for an AI to implement surveillance and enforcement. So more often than not, the big money likes crypto not because of decentralization. The big money likes crypto because it means standardization, and that means like reduce the cost efficiency of operating financial networks. We could have like taxation systems that are automatic, dynamic, self-adjusted, applied for different set of individuals based on any category the government seems fit. And if all of that comes to term, we really will have in Brazil one of the most advanced implementations of the Big Brother concept that was ever seen in the whole world. That's what we're talking about. But of course, Casta, are we there yet? Is this happening, or is it just like a glimpse of the future? Well, technically, we are far from there yet. Okay, we are like scrambling our heads on how to make privacy work on the DREX blockchain. The central bank is really making sluggish progress on that, and overall the project is really challenging. So they intended to launch it on last year, they'll launch next year, and then all being postponed. So guys, this is not going to happen tomorrow. This is really like a really challenging project, and they are facing a lot of difficulties. We don't know if this is going to term, but if it does come to term, it will take some time. But from a philosophical perspective, it doesn't matter if Hyperledger Bezo will create the Brazilian CBDC. We live like in a broader philosophical perspective of a world in crisis. The word perma crisis was elected the word of the year in 2022 by the Collins Dictionary. When a dictionary elects perma crisis as the word of the year, you know that the world is like really in problem. We live in an era of crisis. All of governments do one thing when they see crisis. The first instinct of any government is to survive. And if the world is in turmoil, if the world is in crisis, it is natural that governments will scale up on the authoritarian axis of the political compass. That's why it doesn't matter if it's a left-wing or right-wing government. Governments overall, they tend to be more and more authoritarian. As a response, it is natural that people will drive on the other side and will try to be more and more libertarian. What we are seeing right now is a technological clash where governments will try to use this technology to scale up the authoritarian axis, and people will think how we can use this technology to scale down on the libertarian axis. That is the kind of thing that we have today, so I wrap up in half an hour. like we agreed here. I hope you enjoyed our presentation. I don't know if there is time for questions, but if there is, I will answer them to you. Oh, there is a question here. Is DREX posing a risk of digitally unbanking citizens that can't or won't operate on it either because they economically can't or they refuse to do its nature? Yes, there is a risk, okay, but I don't think that our central bank would like implement DREX and remove all of the paper notes from the economy. That would be like dumb as well, because you will like unbank a lot of people from the economy and they will suffer, and this is not good for the government. So what I think that is most plausible in such a future is that you have like a limited set of paper notes and you allow those paper notes to circulate on neighborhoods and like cities that are not ready yet there for DREX, but they are geographically limited. Only if you are inside of this geographical scope you can use paper money, and this set of paper money cannot leave this geographical delimitation, and it is like backed by a set of DREX tokens locked on a wallet. So we do the inverse correlation. We do the digital money as a backing for the physical money and not the physical money as a backing for the digital money. For me, this would be like the best strategy. But this is the kind of thing that I am extrapolating by myself because our central bank doesn't even go that far and discuss such a future yet. Another one, how can Brazil DREX CBDC ensure financial inclusion while addressing privacy risks from fully traceable transactions? Well, first of all, we are assuming that our government has any interest in preserving privacy or dealing with privacy risks for individuals. I think that if you get the DREX for retail, like the retail CBDC, we will not have a block explorer. It will not be available for us. Like, well, let's check my transaction. How many wallets? Let's explore this. We do not have that kind of functionality, but it may enable financial inclusion because there are like complex markets that will be made easier and have more liquidity. For instance, it is not easy to invest in treasury bills. It is not easy to invest like in mortgage funds. And if you get all of that stuff and all of that become tokens, and you have a system which enables you to deal with tokens, and DREX itself is another token, then it's not about like bringing more people, but people that already know Pix, they will have access to a more sophisticated suite of financial services and solutions, and that of course can improve like financial markets, can get economical efficiency for the overall population. um Last one, and I pass on to Michael. Do you want to answer this last one, Michael? Let's ask this together and then we wrap up. Do you believe DREX would add real value for Brazil, setting aside privacy concerns? I think so. All right, because we are a huge country. We have like lots of intermediaries. Commercial banks in Brazil are really predatory. Lending solutions in Brazil are exorbitant on their practice of rates. Like good investment opportunities are set aside for the wealthy. And if DREX enables people to engage better financially, I think setting aside privacy concerns, I see this kind of innovation with good eyes. And also, one thing that I usually say is that while we are trying to put hats on dogs on the blockchain, our government's doing something like that. So if we don't wake up from our delusion of what does being in a DGen and making money get quick schemes are, and we keep like trying to put hats on dogs, if governments keep pursuing that way, then they are going to be the crypto revolution, and we will see our dogs with hats go to zero, and that concerns me a lot. So it is good to see that the government is stepping up because it may help us to wake up from our like feverish delusion of richness and do something that actually matters instead of putting hats on dogs. So Michael, I pass on the question for you as well, and I think you can wrap up our session.
Yeah, 100% after this post degree about Brazilian current payment system. I think everyone here is enjoy and learn a lot about this. And by my knowledge, I think, like you said, DREX, we have a big challenge in Brazil for technical perspective about implementing privacy. They are under to include some implementation, but they are thinking about ZK, zero knowledge proof, which is Zcash is pioneered this technology. So this technology can solve some problems with encrypted memo, for example, about preserving privacy in the transaction, like you said about Block Explorer, for example. So Zcash blockchain, for example, solved that problem. And yeah, I think privacy is normal. I think privacy is a human right. So privacy can be like a self-defense and being attacked by government and state, because this is a true value that people can hold with this. So yeah, privacy is normal, and I'm here, put my face off to tell people, educate people about like this financial system. Like I said, it's all over the world. It's not just Brazil. So yeah, I think privacy is totally important in this question and this implementation of new system in Brazil.
Okay, so for me, it's wrapping up. Thanks a lot, Michael, for the invitation. Huge thanks to all of the Zcash community and the Zcon organizers.
Yeah, thanks so much. Big thanks to Casta to bring this concerns and history of Brazil for many people. So that was amazing. Thanks so much. Bye bye.
Bye bye.